John Shipp.
Yes.
Thank you very much for doing this. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I'm very excited that we're here to kind of celebrate the Blu-ray release of the original series of The Flash.
Get ready for more than meets the eye. Get ready for The Flash.
Starting kind of with the original series about, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before about the suit.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, sort of what it was like to put it on for the first time. Is it heavy? Could you move?
Well, that was the challenge for George Stevens, who designed it, and Oscar winner Bob Short of Beetlejuice fame, who built it.
Sure.
And I think it's kind of cool that both Flash suits, Grant's and mine, were built by and designed by Oscar winners.
Right, of course.
Colleen Atwood and Bob Short.
Right.
But by the time I got to putting on the suit, it had been such a I don't want to say ordeal, but the first thing they did was they brought me in and they greased me down. I had underwear or whatever, bathing suit.
Right.
And then they wrapped me in cellophane. Now, I'm not asking a lot of questions at this point. Because okay. They aren't explaining a lot.
Right.
And then they had put a spandex suit on over the cellophane.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And what they had done was taken a full body cast of me and then sculpted individual foam latex muscle pieces over my frame, clearly exaggerated. Right. And then they began to glue the individual muscle pieces onto the spandex suit, and that's when I discovered why they greased me down and wrapped me in cellophane.
Oh, okay, I understand.
Because as the glue dried, it got very hot.
Okay.
So we have these white sculpted individual, everything was individually done, glued onto the suit, which then they shot through with an electromagnetic charge and flocked it with a red material. And then shaded it, which you can really see in the Blu-ray. Some of the shading on the original suit, the red is so dark it's almost black.
Yeah, I actually really like how the lightning bolt is sort of very exaggerated. Like, it makes it really look, and I feel like, that show was sort of before we were doing this, everything's comic book accurate, now it would be, totally different, but I feel like then it was sort of pushing boundaries in terms of superhero television. I mean, I was 14, 15, something like that when that show came out, and I was obsessed with it. Red was my favorite color. I have cerebral palsy, so I couldn't run. So the idea of a superhero who was super speed was the coolest thing. But I wanted to ask about Barry Allen, your version of Barry Allen. So he's a scientist, he works with the police, but he's not a cop. Was there something about his character that you really liked in terms of why you were drawn to him?
When they first approached me about auditioning to play a superhero for television, I was very hesitant.
Sure.
And I was not sure. I'd been on Broadway. I had my 2 daytime Emmys. I had, I fancied myself a serious actor.
Right, of course.
And I wasn't sure, up to that point, comic book shows on television had been largely spoofed, hadn't they?
Sure.
And I was like, I don't think that's really where my interests lay.
Right.
And then I spoke to iconic casting director April Webster, multiple Emmy Award winning. Thank God we had her. Our guest stars were through the roof. But anyway, and she was talking to me about it. And I said, well, I don't do spoofy comedy, and I don't think that I'd be very good. She said, John, if that's what this was, do you think I'd be attached to it?
Right.
She said, do me a favor, just read Danny Bilson Paul DeMayo's treatment. Just read it. And then we'll talk in 3 or 4 days. Well, I'm reading this script where Barry Allen is the unblessed son of a cop family where real cops work the streets, but I'd gone into the crime lab, so my mom would be worried that we might all not be coming home that night.
Right.
I say I was CSI before CSI was cool.
Right.
And then he goes through this explosion, all that happens, but his first reaction is, and the first thing that piqued my interest was, I don't want to know this. I want to be rid of these powers. It wasn't Hugh Hollywood hero, it was, I don't want to know from this, I'm happy in the crime lab, and that's why I go to Tina. And it's only after my brother's killed, to get revenge, that I assumed the powers. I said, okay, I could wrap my mind around that.
What it actually kind of reminded me of, because I did rewatch, a big chunk of the original series to, kind of prep for this, is that it gave me sort of a vibe of almost like the Lou Ferrigno, like Incredible Hulk. Like he's trying to release himself from it, and he kind of has to have that, sort of, come to Jesus moment or whatever, where he's like, I need to. It's for the greater good kind of thing, and I had completely forgotten that he was like the black sheep of his family, and I'm like, because like I said, I was 14, so I was like, oh man,
but it's like my dad was always making fun. Like I'd go to work, my people would go, my mom would say, be careful, Barry, and Emmett Walsh, playing my dad, would say, what's he gonna do? Stop his toe on a footprint? Yeah, all this stuff. But my brother and I are still very close, played by the excellent Tim Thomerson.
Oh, yeah.
And what I liked, though, was it wasn't a resignation to being a hero to save the world.
Sure.
It was, I'm holding my dead brother's body in my arms, and I'm going to go get those guys.
Yeah.
And then the most poignant moment where I felt Emmett and I really bonded were when we were standing by Tim's grave, by Jay, his name was.
Right.
And I tell him, Dad, I'm going to go get those guys. And he says, Barry, didn't I ever tell you don't point a gun unless you have a bullet in the chamber? And I say, I have the bullet.
Yeah.
But I can't tell him what it is.
Oh, yeah. It's so good.
All that.
It's so good.
All that I could play.
It was like a little bit Shakespearean almost.
A little bit.
Like I mean, just like through the lens of it, it was pretty amazing. But you did mention Emmy Award winning, and speaking of that, I wanted to gravitate towards Dawson's Creek a little bit.
Right on.
I was a big fan of that. I was in my early 20s when that was out, and I ended up rewatching it with my son recently, who was in his 20s now, so we were watching it, and streaming yourself. But I wanted to ask you. You play a lot of dad characters, and not like what I would call TV dad characters. They're like real characters, like they're flawed and they have personality quirks. And Mitch Lurie in particular was so supportive and so like just a good dad.
His superpower was love. He wasn't the brightest bulb on the tree. He was always tinkering around with his aquatic themed restaurant.
Right.
Mom was earning the money for the family.
Right.
But he loved his family, and that was his distinguishing characteristic.
Yeah, he has this really great line, I don't remember what episode this is from, where he says, I'm never going to write a movie that'll save the world, but my son might. Like, but what I wanted to ask is I wasn't sure if you had any kids of your own, but I had assumed not because I wasn't really finding the information, but given that, how do you tap into being these dads, these, supportive, because Henry, also very similar to Mitch, kind of.
But smarter, smarter, heart surgeon.
Yeah, but he's sort of like, in a way, he's like Barry's moral anchor.
Oh, he totally is.
So I'm just curious how you find that.
Well, number one, I think a lot of credit goes to my mother and how I was parented and how important. Even we went through some controversy around civil rights and stuff and violence and stuff, but the family unit was always strong, and we always leaned on each other. And then I have a brother who has my niece Danielle, my nephew Benjamin, who I'm the godfather of Danielle, and I'm very close to them. But it's always been for me, if something is well written, and these pieces really work. Kevin, the Dawson Mitch scenes were well written.
Yes.
The Henry Barry scenes were phenomenal. I mean, it's like I asked, Grant saw the Flash pilot first before I did, and I saw him at the upfronts, and he said, have you seen it? Have you seen it? Have you seen it? And I said, is it okay? Is it good? He said, man, I was sitting there grasping the seat saying, it's so not cool to cry at your own scene. But they were beautifully written.
Yeah.
And every time you thought there was no other way that the father-son scene could be written, it would be, they come up with something different.
Yeah.
I would know that he was the Flash, but I wasn't going to pull his covers. If the Flash were my son, I'd tell him, he's a hero, he's saving a lot of lives, it's dangerous, but most of all, his dad's proud of it.
Yeah.
Well, I was so fond of James in his way, and Grant in his way, although they work very differently.
Sure.
That I formed friendships and relationships with the actors, particularly with Grant, because you figure not only are we both from Norfolk, Virginia, not only are we both born in January, but he was born the year I was first doing The Flash, right?
Oh, okay.
He knew I was The Flash. I knew what he was taking on, so I knew some of what he might be experiencing.
Right.
And so it was very easy once I knew he was such a truthful actor and a sincere person to just hold up a mirror and reflect back to him. To try to put him at ease and say, man, you're great. You know, it was easy to do.
Do you think that he was intimidated from playing the character that someone else had played? Or did you kind of sort of talk to him and be like, it's cool, you got this,
I never had to say that in so many words, but I remember what I went through when I realized that I was stepping into a character that was 50 years old.
Right.
The Flash was 50 years old in comic books by the time I got to it.
Sure.
And the fact that the loyal fan base, since I was the only live action Flash for 24 years, they were still with me, and I knew that there had to have been some, because fans can get stuck in one group. Well, he wasn't muscular enough, they would say at the beginning, or he's too young, or he played a villain on Glee. And I would say, wait a minute, when I came to The Flash, I had 2 Emmys for playing psychos.
Right, yeah.
Or I'd said, actually, it makes more sense. He's more aerodynamic. Or you think he's too young, make the show a hit. In a couple of years, he won't be.
Right, yeah.
So I was constantly trying to reinforce, because once I got to know Grant, I wanted for him what we just missed. We had massive critical acclaim, and all the major newspapers coast to coast.
Sure.
But we did not quite get the popular success. And what I wanted for him was to have the popular success that we just missed.
Sure. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, I actually, I think a lot of us forget that, Dawson's Creek did win all those Emmys and did start the careers of all these kids.
Well, that's what I tell people. I say, listen, at the beginning, remember, we were the critically acclaimed Dawson's Creek.
Of course.
We were editor's pick, TV guide, week after week, because never had a show been written for young people that way. In other words, writing up to a young audience instead of down to a young. A very famous actor said at one point at a dinner party, kids don't talk that way. And without hesitation, Kevin Williamson shot back, maybe not, but they'd like to.
Yeah, I've seen the interview you're talking about. So just 2 more questions. I wanted to ask you, when you got to do the crossovers, where you're coming back to playing Jay Garrick and the other multiverse versions on the CW show, how early in the sort of process of making the show did they tell you, oh hey, we're going to bring you back as this other character?
Dude, they didn't.
Oh,
somehow through the chain of command, it slipped through the communication process, because I got to tell you, I figured Henry had 1, maybe 2 seasons, and I figured at the end of season 2 that was going to be it, and I'd be very happy to leave, and I would have done my job, and passed the torch. But then I'm in a costume fitting, and there's this ripped up, ragged brown prison suit that I'm trying on, and I'm going, well, this is weird. I'm already out of prison. And then the costume, Kate Maine said, of course, you'll be fitted for the Iron Mask separately, and I'm like, the what? The Iron what? And she said, oh my God, you don't know? I didn't tell you. Then it gets better. I'm sitting off camera between scenes with Grant and Jesse. And they said, did you hear you're going to be doing that season? I said, well, I heard I'm the man in the Iron Mask. And they're like, yeah. That's all you know. I said, there's more. They said, you're the real Jay Garrick.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how they were able to connect all the shows together and do all of this. I do love the picture that I got signed earlier where, Ollie's wearing the Flash suit and Grant's wearing the suit, but it's not the right suit. And, it's just, I love how Grant's just like a little kid, He just has, the energy of, a 10-year-old.
The perfect moment is when he finally decides to tell his dad in the Trickster episode. Saves me from the box of knives. We're outside. And he decides to reveal himself. Go back and watch that. Yeah. He turns into a 12-year-old boy. And my line is, well, you always did look good in ring.
Okay, so one final question.
Yeah.
Clearly, you love this character. You're very passionate about playing it. Is there a scenario where if Warner Brothers worked some sort of magic and they said, hey, multiverse is a thing now, we want you to come back for some variation, would you be like, Where do I sign, or would you have to think about it?
In 1991, I ripped the wings off, threw them in the air. Mark Hamill got them. He was in the front, and I swore I'd never get in another superhero suit as long as I lived.
Sure.
I have learned never to say never. If I could show up in a meaningful way and contribute, and not as a stunt,
Right. You want to.
which is what the CW gave me.
Right.
I got to show. In fact, Mark said it's so unusual for actors to get to come back to a franchise 25 years later and contribute in a meaningful way
Sure.
to the new version. He had just come from doing it in Star Wars, and
Right.
then we were doing it on the fire.
That's pretty amazing. John Shipp, thank you very much for talking to me. I appreciate it.